Welcome everybody to the Rap K podcast. As always, I'm your host Chris Platte, aka Platte Pods, with a very special guest, Brian, aka Z, co-founder of Audio Mac, executive vice president of global operations, head of artist label and services, partner at DJ Booth, consultant for Sunday Songs, and overall music industry savant.
Thank you, Chris. Also, not among the titles that you listed, husband, father, son, brother, friend, cousin, relative.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I tried to get every professional title, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to write this shit down. I'm gonna have to write this
Well,
down
thank you for the
before we
warm
start.
intro.
But no, I've been following your content for years. I'm a big fan of everything you're doing, and I'm really happy to have you on here because I want to pick your brain about so many things. But one of the biggest things that I have a conversation with on my platform with my co-host regularly is about the AI in music. So you have Gunna saying he wants to sign an AI artist. You have Timberland with his company that he started that's AI, and that the controversy surrounding that. Alchemist has spoken on working with AI, and Ye obviously has made that claim as well. And then Baby Chief did it recently, said, "Hey, I use ChatGPT to write my raps." And then also there was that FN Mechana back in like 2023, 2020, yeah, like 2022, somewhere in that range, the first like AI artist. And so there's so much of it, and it's so fascinating because I mean, a lot of those names are pretty prominent names in the music industry. These aren't just people that are, trying to make it or of lesser known. So of all these AI entanglements, like which do you find most interesting as somebody that's kind of looking at the business of it and looking at the whole industry scope of it?
Yeah, so I think the first place I would start is where I'm currently seated, which is someone who is operating a streaming service.
Mhm.
So, on average, streaming services are seeing hundreds of thousands of new songs being distributed to our platforms every day. And we've noticed an uptick in the last 6 to 12 months. So now an even higher volume of material is being disseminated. A good portion of which, according to some sources, it's roughly 20%, completely made by AI.
Mhm.
So these products are flooding streaming services, and I think first and foremost, we have to consider what this will mean both for the user experience, but also for the human artist and creator community. Let's start with the user experience. It's hard enough getting streaming users to lean in and be active and discovery driven. There's a tendency, based on the way that these services were created, for users to be passive and simply let the platform dictate to them what they should be listening to. If you are an active user, though, you are now having to filter through more garbage. And that is deeply concerning because the time that you're spending doing that, you're not likely listening to your next favorite artist. On the flip side, for artists, the royalty pools are being diluted because you have non-artists delivering, we'll use air quotes, music to the
Right.
service. And as a result, it has intensified streaming fraud. So you have billions of dollars being diverted away from rights holders and real artists and going into the hands and pockets of unsavory folks. I would even call some scam artists. Does it stand to reason, Chris, that some do have good intentions? Yeah. But from what we're seeing and in my experience, that portion of the pie is probably the smallest slice so far. You mentioned a ton of artists and all of them being different use cases.
Mhm.
You know, Timberland is in bed with a company that he is being paid by to hawk AI. So that sort of helps explain away his public behavior. I'm not defending it, but
Right.
that's the rationale there. And then some of the others that you've mentioned are artists or creators or producers who have in some way, shape, form, or fashion integrated AI technology into their workflow, their writing, their production, their output. Um, for me, it's a moral issue.
Hmm.
Um, how much of this process is being dominated by technology, and where does it overlap with other technologies that have been readily available to creatives for a long time and have been accepted as viable tools? It remains to be seen. As much as there has been progress in I think we could both agree it's still very early days.
Right. And that's where I want to get to with this is, are there kind of any legislations in process for AI or previously or currently, I should say, even in place? Like, and if there isn't, where do you think you start about that? Because I know it is kind of, cat's out of the bag. It's already started, but I mean, just because something started doesn't mean you just completely give up on it. So if you're kind of jumping into the governing body of the music industry, like what are you kind of looking to instill and what currently is in place at all for AI?
So far, nothing. um, Typically, the way that the music industry works is when there is disruption of any kind, the first move is to threaten the disruptors with lawsuits.
Right.
That's already happened. And the second move then is to figure out a way for the industry to get into bed with the disruptors, because ultimately they will view the disruption as an opportunity to create a brand new revenue stream.
Right.
And so that is what is already happening. There is partnerships that are either in place or are being actively worked on that effectively will serve as licensing agreements where companies that really, without permission, allowed their models to train off of the IP of signed artists to use their intellectual property rights,
Hmm.
and then have that be available as a resource within these softwares. So, how is this going to play out? Well, just like we've seen within streaming, it will mostly help those at the very top. The label systems will benefit the greatest, and there won't be the trickle down that the middle tier and lower tier artists would like to see in terms of creating more revenue to hopefully offset what they're not generating in traditional standard sales and streaming.
Okay. And so you brought up something interesting. I want to kind of get to that part about, this helping the top. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think this does a lot to help the top. But how could you, if you're putting yourself in shoes today, like say I'm an artist now that wants to make music, that wants to break through. I am just starting. I feel like there's some AI usage you can use in some sense to help you in terms of maybe even like looking at it from the marketing side or helping you with social posting or graphics or some type of management or just even just using it as just a research vessel to understand kind of contracts and all the things that you talk about. Like I feel like there are some sides of it where you can work at it there because creatively I'm with you. It's a to me it's a very moral issue. Human's supposed to be or art is supposed to be a human experience to me. So I'm with you there, but do you think that there's any type of way that these tools can help in a morally positive way an up and coming artist or somebody that's trying to get out there?
Absolutely. So it is very hard to be an artist. It has always been very hard to be an artist. It will always be very hard
Yes.
to be an artist. So let's start there. And one of the most challenging components of pursuing a career in the arts, any art, whether it's
Hmm.
music or otherwise, is the financial portion, right?
Hmm.
You need to be able to pull capital from somewhere to invest in your art. And we're talking specifically about music, whether that's covering the costs of an engineer to mix and master your work or a graphic designer to create thoughtful, beautifully designed artwork or promotional assets, a videographer or a photographer, or a social media manager to assist you with your branding and your aesthetic and your typography. Like it's the list
Yeah.
of responsibilities and expenses is never ending. So to answer your question, are there ways where you can utilize AI technology, especially at the earliest stages of a career when you don't have the financial resources or the know-how? Absolutely. I have urged artists to use some of these tools to put together frameworks for a social media posting schedule or a marketing campaign or an album rollout, right? They can serve the purpose of someone who, if they were hired, would be asking for thousands of dollars a month. And that's
Right.
likely, in many cases, thousands of dollars
Yeah.
that an artist does not have.
Right. Right. I agree 100%. As a podcaster, I do not have thousands to shell out. But you brought up at the top of this, you brought up DSPs, and one of the interesting things I saw was Spotify, and they've been doing this. This isn't necessarily new, but it's kind of become even more and more apparent that they are shifting away from music in terms of their platform and what they're pushing and what they're looking for. They're looking for, long-term retention, and that is in the form of podcasts and videos and shows and such. Like Spotify is kind of moving away from there. So what does this mean for all artists when Spotify, the biggest DSP by a landslide, is making this shift? For when you see all these other platforms, yourself, Apple Music, Tidal, all of that. Like, what does this mean for them, and generally, what does this mean for the artists?
So let's start with streaming as a whole. The margins are very narrow,
Hmm.
and it is very challenging economically to run a streaming service. And Spotify is a publicly traded company, so their loyalty is to their shareholders.
Right.
And, historically speaking, when it came to tech or music tech, the idea was it's okay to lose money as long as you continue to grow your audience base. And there has been a sea change over the past few years where shareholders are like, okay, great, but like we want a path to profitability. And historically, Spotify was a loser. And I don't mean that in the sense that like they're a bad company inherently, but that they were in the red every quarter
Hmm.
up until they made some very critical decisions about their business model. And those decisions were to help their margins, because music streaming, the margins are poor. They
Hmm.
integrated social and audiobooks and podcasts and other forms of audio and video content where they either own it outright or the licensing terms are not anywhere close to those of the major labels and Merlin. And what that allowed them to do was increase their profits. And so I think, they've had several quarters over the last 18 months where they've been in the black. So that is helpful for making shareholders happy.
Right.
Does that mean though that these changes are good for the user and for the artist? Let's start with the user. So there is some attractiveness to having a platform that really is like a catch-all audio
Hmm.
service where you can do all of your passive streaming in one place, right? So whether you are a commuter or you're cleaning the house or you need something to soundtrack your activity, whether it's an audiobook, a podcast, or music, you can get it all in one place. That's attractive to a user. From the artist perspective, though, you are now competing with other non-artists for the same real estate within an app and for the same time and attention of the user. Less than ideal. Every minute someone's listening to an audiobook, every minute someone's listening to a podcast, they're not listening to music. And so that becomes challenging. At AudioMac, we have focused on being a great music streaming app, being a great artist discovery app. And we have no intentions of being a catch all app in which we try to incorporate every feature that other apps in our space has rolled out for the sake of trying to capture the entire market.
Okay. It feels like to me, because like this combined with what you're saying kind of feels like almost like we're on the verge of some sort of shift from streaming in terms of music. And I don't know what that is, because the convenience of streaming is so massive to the user. I almost wonder what we can expect next, because I mean, with these artists, like, do we start to see a new model that these artists go to? We're seeing a lot of more direct to consumer action, things like that. I'm almost wondering if, just looking at realistically, the history is, you have every 10 to 15 years there's something that changes, whether it's cassettes to CDs to vinyls back in the day, like things of that nature. Like there's always to iTunes digitally buying it. Like I wonder if there's some sort of if we're going to reach some sort of point where there's going to be something new on the horizon beyond streaming for artists.
I mean, your viewers will probably call me biased for saying this because of my role as a co-founder of a streaming service, but I
Right.
can't see it, right? It's like once you fly first class, the idea of ever sitting in coach again is just a non-starter, right? By the same token, the idea of having access to music on demand from the palm of your hands and then going back to not having that, I think for most consumers would be a non-starter, because the reality is that most consumers are casual. They're
Right.
passive. Um, you know, this is not new, but it has been intensified during the streaming era. I like what you said, though, in that there has been a renewed focus by a lot of notable artists for D2C, direct to consumer.
Hmm.
If you have a fan base in place who has an appetite for more than just streaming your music and has a proclivity for sharing their support financially, to not offer something of tangible value, whether that be the music in hard copy or something else merch related, is silly. I think there was an overcorrection, right? Everybody got onto the streaming wave and then, for the most part, abandoned offline.
Right.
And now we're seeing a return to that renewed. It's more work. It takes capital. It takes operational prowess and organization, but the margins are incredible. And anyone who buys anything from you is either going to wear it or proudly display it. And this is like having a street team from back in the day who, they're out and about in the real world and they're serving as a billboard for you
Yeah.
and your music. So to not take advantage of it.
Grassroots action. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and that perfectly kind of transitions to what I wanted to talk about. The last thing, that I'm glad that you're as excited about it as me. And I should have known that of all the people I follow on my timeline, that you are going to be just as excited about this as I am. But the return of rollouts, man. It's just so refreshing as somebody that's consuming music every week. I mean, I'm listening to a minimum of 5 to 7 albums plus singles every week that are brand new. And to have these rollouts, to have them, to have these kind of spectacles. The surprise drops were very cool, very unique experiences. I think Travis Scott was one of the best at mastering it with the hiding the features, because with Travis, you're coming for the experience. I thought that was a really, really cool thing. So I think there was some stuff, and then I think much like getting to streaming services, there was an overcorrection, and everybody kind of jumped on jumped onto those wavelengths. But we've seen, JID, Clipse, Tyler, Maria the Scientist, like all great rollouts. And now it has me just kind of reworking my brain now that we're seeing them consistently. Like I thought Offset had a phenomenal album that I thought could have done very well and received a lot of attention with a proper rollout. I thought the tribute to Takeoff's passing on there was beautiful. I thought the music is very high quality. And then to me, I'm even interested in Drake's streaming rollout. Like that's very, very new for an artist, and especially an artist that big. And Drake is usually not cryptic. He's usually very, very broad, very open with his and transparent with his releases. I thought that was interesting. And then Young Thug, obviously, there's a whole lot of controversy around that right now, and where he's at. So good and bad, but for better for worse, I think we're seeing, effective rollouts really, really make a return and capture a lot of people's attention. So, which of those kind of stand out to you as far as rollouts, and and how much do you see this scaling back, like in terms of rollouts? Like how many do you see adopting this? Is this still going to be few and far between for a while, or do you think this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to jump on in the next 18 months?
Everything is cyclical in both the society and the music business, right?
Right.
What goes around comes around. So very happy to see the thoughtfulness and the diligence and the planning that is required in order to have a multifaceted strategic rollout that starts prior to the release of an album and continues through the release and then for some time post release. Several of the albums that you mentioned that we've seen over the past 6 months, I think all of them were successful because one, the artists bought in, and it starts there. I talked about this throughout the extended Clipse rollout. A rollout is only as good as two things. One, the music itself, and the artist buying into the work that is required for it to be successful. Unfortunately, the reason why we don't see even more rollouts are because, or at least to that degree, is because artists are often turning in their albums at the 25th hour.
Right.
And it's very hard to do a lot when everybody on your extended team and at the label hasn't heard the music, doesn't know for sure if it's coming because they literally don't have it in their system. And then also, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Hearing. I spoke with Stephen Victor, who has been the Clipse manager for quite some time, and he mentioned that the guys committed to nonstop travel to accommodate all of the interviews and shoots and content capture over a period of a few months. And they both have families and children, and it's a big commitment, right?
Mhm.
It's just like going out on a world tour. You're leaving home,
Exactly. Yeah.
and it's not easy. And so it starts there. Will we see more commit to this? Well, I think it's not a hot take to say that in the music business, there's few leaders and a ton of followers.
Mhm.
So the more who do this, the more will follow because they'll see that it's working and they'll want that same success. But they have to know it starts with the music being done and then being put into the hands of your team or your label or your distributor to take the handoff, so to speak, and then committing to it and not ending the rollout the day the album drops.
Right.
And Chris, I can make a great argument to all of your listeners that the most valuable and important part of a rollout actually is after it's out, after the music is
I'm
released.
so glad
Because
I was going to get to that.
if you market an album pre-release, someone has to remember to come back to you when the music's available for consumption. But when you market an album post-release, the call to action is
Right here.
listen now,
Click this
buy
link.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to wait. You don't have to write it down in your calendar. You don't have to remember to come back to it. Um, that can be extremely effective. And the long tail of streaming allows for consistent consumption then over time. We saw this play out over almost 12 months with Doechii.
Yeah.
The initial release of her mixtape last year, the streams and sales weren't great,
Hmm.
but they actively marketed the hell out of that mixtape for almost 10 months. And now she is seeing consistent consumption over a much longer period of time due to those efforts.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was a great one. And if we have time at the end of this, I want to ask you a Doechii question because that's a very interesting one that you brought up. But I am glad you brought up the post album drop part of it because that's always one thing that I've been kind of like as soon as you've been saying it, I've been championing it myself. Like, yeah, that just makes sense because now at this point you have the artists be able to see what is working, see what people are gravitating to because before the album drops, you're guessing, right? You're guessing which one, you're relying on your team and your judgment to make a decision on these are going to be the songs that we are going to push. And it's very cost effective market wise. And so I think that that's a huge plus for them to do that. And like you said, then the call to action is right there. It's no longer, hey, wait for this. It's coming. It's going to be great. No, it's here now. If you like this, here's the rest of it. So I love that. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned as far as being a difficulty for rollouts to kind of continue is that, I mean, we've heard for the last 2 years now, hip hop in particular, all genres of music industry, they've had a lot of cuts in terms of employment at label offices and things like that. And so I gotta believe that it's very that not that labels are just kind of like, okay, yeah, so if we don't have to spend money to market this and we could just do a couple things to make it, ooh, this surprise drop tonight at midnight, put it out there, like a couple tweets and that's it. I think that that probably saved them a ton of money, and that was probably part of the reason why rollouts kind of died, along with, like you said, artists turning in albums at the last minute. That's obviously a very, very big part of it too. But I do think that just reading the tea leaves, like that's got to be a correlation if you're making all those layoffs and firings at these labels, that some of that has to come from the marketing budget or the marketing staff of these artists.
Yeah, undoubtedly, there is a correlation. You have to have people in the building to work these records,
Hmm.
but you also need people in the building who know how to work the records. You could have $100,000 marketing budget, but if those financial resources are poorly allocated, it doesn't matter. Um, you know, a lot of artists, and this is no fault of their own, have signed record contracts with labels who, even at the time of signing, were a bad fit. They were ill prepared to work with certain artists based on the genre or sound or style of these acts. Given we're now in the midst of nearly 24 months worth of waves of layoffs, you now have fewer individuals in these buildings, many of whom are unqualified.
Right.
And as a result, the onus has shifted a great deal onto the artist and their management to spearhead the ideation, creation, and execution of a lot of these campaigns. And that is a ton of work on top of creating the music. My position has always been, though, if you know what to expect, that changes everything. If you expect the label to do it all, you will be disappointed. If the expectation is that even after you sign, the responsibility will still remain with you, and that the label is just there as a resource to provide capital and assistance, then that should change, the outlook.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think so much of it it's also, yeah, knowing just artist education, which is why you're one of my favorites, is because nobody breaks it down like you do when it comes to just educating the artists and really just honestly giving back to the art community. The last thing I want to ask with rollouts, and then if I could steal a little bit more time, I have a couple questions I just love to get to. Um, but with rollouts, so what is an artist like just from your scope of things? Who's an artist that comes to mind of like now that you've seen this revival of rollouts? Like you're like, oh, I'm watching this person or this group or because they could really do something with it. Is there someone that comes to mind when you're seeing these rollouts come back that you're like, oh man, I really can't wait. For example, I would love to see an Anderson .Paak rollout. I think Anderson .Paak is a very creative, very engaging, very charismatic person. I think he's somebody that if he commits to a rollout, I think he could really do something spectacular. Is there an artist that comes to mind for you?
I mean, I would love for Frank Ocean to reappear.
I
Is that asking too much?
think so.
Frank already gave us a quite memorable
Yeah.
rollout, albeit in brief with
Yeah.
Endless. Yeah, I mean, Frank is a genius as far as I'm concerned, and would love to see what that looks like in terms of world building around the music.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think where a lot of artists struggle is they view content creation and marketing as extra or as different.
Hmm.
And when I talk to artists and artist management, I implore them to view it as an extension of the music, right? You're telling a story, but there are multiple avenues through which a story can be told. So obviously, if you're a recording artist, one of those avenues is the music itself.
Hmm.
But that isn't necessarily or even likely to be for most the first point of consumption. We all listen with our eyes first before our ears, especially now in a timeline and scrolling
Right.
digital world. And so, how fun, and I say that as a non artist, but how fun is it to think about how you can tell your story as an extension of the music in a variety of other ways, ways in which people are currently consuming? Because back in the day, there was only so many options, right? There were physical billboards which still exist, right? Which but today are mostly a social media play. Like, hey, look at me! Like I
Yeah.
this billboard behind me. It was traditional print interviews in magazines and newspapers, but in these cases, like it was through the lens of someone else. Someone else controlled the narrative that you shared with them. You now, as an artist, have full creative control over the narrative and the story that you want to put out and the world that you want to build. No one else is going to change that. Not a writer, not a blogger, nobody. So take advantage of that and understand the role of storytelling through digital marketing.
Uh, I love that. I love that. Do you do you mind if I hit you
No,
with a
I
couple
don't
more
mind.
questions? All right,
No, let's
great,
go.
great, great,
Do
great.
it.
Because I'm really happy to have, man. I could ask you a million questions, but I wrote down a couple. First one is going back to the artist and the artist education that you do such a great job of. You have royalties, licensing, and distribution. Define what's most valuable to an artist and why of those three.
Well, they're all entangled,
Yeah.
right? So you have to start with distribution, right? Because that partner, the terms of that particular deal will essentially dictate the rest.
Mhm.
So there are two types of distributors. There are what I call broad spectrum distributors. You pay a flat rate either per month or annually, and you get the opportunity to upload an unlimited number of songs. And then there are elevated, more specialty distributors where you're basically partnering with this company. they're not charging you a flat rate per month or per year, but they're taking a portion of your royalties. That could be 90-10, 90 to the artist, 10 to the distributor, could be 85-15, 80-20. Some distribution deals are 50-50 and are essentially partnerships. And that depends on the level of investment and artist services that the distributor is providing. Let's go back a second. We mentioned before expectation setting, and that being paramount in the pursuit of a career in music. Um, if you're working with a label or a distributor, to me, what it's about is what are the expectations going in? If someone is offering you a distribution deal, keep your masters, 85-15 split. So you're giving up 15% of your royalties. What's the term length? Is it 6 to 12 months? Is it 6 to 12 years? Right?
Right.
How long do you want to commit to allowing this other entity to make money off of your music? And for how long will they be actively working on it with you?
Right.
And then, depending on where you're at in your career, you should know where you need help. Is it in digital marketing? Is it in social media strategy? Is it in playlist pitching? Is it in radio? For some artists, depending on the genre of music, for instance, country or pop, it could be. And so at that point, you have to ask yourself, is what they're offering in services robust enough for me to agree to give up this portion of my royalties? And that is a very personalized, individual, bespoke, case by case basis situation where it would be impossible for me or anyone to say, under these terms, with these rates,
Yeah.
you should say yes, because everybody's situation.
Right. 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 So one of the things, just again, you're a music guy. You know the business side of it, and so to me, I love samples. I love a great sample. I love when a great sample is flipped. I mean, it just enhances the song so much. It captures me right away. Uh, just for fun, I like to ask this question. What is, to your knowledge, some of like the most expensive samples to clear? Like what are the ones where it's like, or difficult, I should say. Difficult, I should say it.
Um, um, the Eagles
Yeah.
famously refused to allow Frank Ocean to clear Hotel California. Um, I mean, there's a million. Sample clearance has become an extremely costly endeavor. And for most artists, you're either giving up a ton of upfront cash or your entire backend, which means you're not making anything on publishing and they're taking a portion of your master. And so it's the economics aren't in your favor. It's hard enough to
Hmm.
generate consistent royalties, and that's when you own 100% of everything. So then it becomes a question of is what you're giving up, both today and in the future, worth having this piece of art, this song out in the marketplace? And for some, they reach the conclusion that it makes no sense, while others are like, "Yeah, I already spent all the time on it, and it would kill me to know that no one will ever hear this. Let's just get it out into the world." Um, Deborah Manis Gardner, who is a OG sample clearance agent and someone who I've always sort of leaned on for her expertise in this space, she'll tell you, you know, in many cases, if you can't afford to work with a sample clearance agent to get something cleared, you probably can't afford the samples.
Hey. Yeah.
So keep that in mind when you are thinking about how you want to release the music. Uh, that said, I know a lot of artists who they go in and they'll tell me the last thing I want to do is create from a place of will I or won't I be able to get this cleared?
Yeah.
Because that is creatively stifling. The
Hmm.
best way to approach it is I'm just going to go ahead and do me. I'm going to make this art, and then We'll see how I feel about it when I'm done. And then depending on that feeling, that will dictate what the best course of action is.
Yeah, yeah. I just I love asking that because like you get all these like oh this artist just got a Marvin Gaye clearance. That's a huge flex. Like this is that. So I'm like yeah. I wonder. I maybe sit back and think like what are some of the ones that that are top of the line to clear. Two hip hop cases before I get you out of here. One, I find this fascinating because I didn't know it. Obviously, I'm very aware of his music. I've consumed some of his music, but NBA Youngboy is going on his first tour. And just from a logistical perspective, like that shocked me as somebody that, is always when you look at these digital numbers, whether it be streams or whether it be album sales or whatever, he is very much near the top of a lot of hip hop artists, like like him. I know Rod Wave tours a lot, but that's another example of an artist that's doing extremely well commercially, more than you might think. Just looking at the surface level of it. So break it down to me. Like, how is this NBA YoungBoy's like first like tour as his own? Now, I know he's done shows with people, but his first tour, I just find that so surprising given all of the years and the amount of music that he's put out. And I believe he's in negotiation for a new deal, right? Or soon.
So the answer really is simple, and that is he had legal issues
Hmm.
that put him on house arrest for a lengthy period of time. And that situation restricted his mobility. He was simply
Hmm.
unable to tour, or he would, I would assume, have been in violation of his probation. Um, that said, his success is not a surprise to me or anyone who works at AudioMac because he is the most popular artist on our service and has been for over 5 years.
Wow.
And the reason is that perhaps he's a sleeping giant. His audience is our audience, which is to say, his audience is young and multicultural. Audio Max demographic, we have 94% of our users are under the age of 34, and 91% are multicultural. And many of them have socioeconomic impediments that make streaming difficult,
Hmm.
namely, you know, uh, minimal or no disposable income, lack of access to credit and debit, hard cap data plans, Wi-Fi issues like living in a Wi-Fi desert, and as a result, a subscription to Spotify or Apple Music is a non-starter.
Hmm.
You just can't do it, and so his fans lean heavily on AudioMac and on YouTube to listen to his music, but the way that Billboard works is streams that come from platforms that offer an ad supported tier, those streams are weighted less than on demand streams from a paid subscription only service. So as a result, his impact, his sales, his streams have been undercounted historically. So the fact that he has in pre-sales done so well doesn't surprise me at all because the audience is there. It's just not reflective in the Billboard numbers.
Hmm. Wow. That's yeah, he's somebody that just completely amazes me in terms of his placement and just the reception of it because I have met genuinely in my life, I talk music with everybody. I've genuinely met one NBA YoungBoy fan, one person that like is like, yeah, I listen to him, and that's all he listens to, and yet I look at the success he's had, and it's absolutely incredible. The last thing is we kind of mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to circle back to it, is Doechii because the Doechii thing to me is so fascinating. To me, it's probably one of the most fascinating conversations in hip hop right now because you have this constant, as somebody that's been hosting for years, music discussions and particularly hip hop, this thirst for like the next superstar, the next era, and you've had like Kendrick, Drake, and Cole, who is my era, but you have everybody else kind of like wanting to champion their new guy, and it's Lil Baby for a couple years. It's the Baby. It's Meg the Stallion. It's a lot of these artists that have had very strong moments, but didn't quite seem to fully capture the hip hop demographic the way that those three did in Kendrick, J. Cole, and Drake. And so Doechii, here you have this person that's having just amazing success, and yet she has this constant backlash, and you have these people saying, where did she come from, blah blah blah. And I've always kind of pushed back on that because I'm like, if you really look at it, it was, to me, it was a perfect storm that resulted in Doechii's success. It was the fact that she had been putting in the legwork. She had records that had some buzz. She was behind a powerful and a very good marketing label in TDE. So she had a lot of the grassroots there, and then she just became this like almost this like symbol or this variable of the Drake and Kendrick battle that took place. And so that lightning in a bottle kind of struck perfectly for her, because then the Kendrick fans championed her, and then the Drake fans resulted in this intense backlash with her. And you saw that combined with what you brought up earlier, the amazing 10-month marketing campaign of her after she put out her mixtape. Um, to me, I mean, that is somebody, I should say, because I think it's far from over. But that is somebody that's on a superstar trajectory, and yet she's receiving this, what maybe I don't want to call it a minority because it's not that small, but a group that is creating a very strong backlash for her. And it just makes me wonder, how do we get the next like true hip hop superstar? Because we've seen a lot of ways, but I mean, at some point, man, we got to move on from the Drake, Kendrick, and Cole era. Like we have to, as hip hop fans, and we there's a lot of great artists that are a lot of different ages, but they have been the ones that have consistently captured the media spotlight.
Well, Drake, Kendrick, and Cole all came of age before the start of the streaming era,
Hmm.
which is 2015. And they were able to um, share the beginning of their story. The Genesis chapter of their career was written before user consumption habits changed, before social media
Right.
played such a significant role in the way that we discuss all of this. And so they've benefited greatly from that, whereas most other artists have not. The other two artists you didn't mention, but who I would put into that same category, whose journeys began early but have peaked within the streaming era, are Travis Scott and Tyler, the
Yes.
Creator,
Yeah.
right? Will we see another superstar? Well, it depends how we define what a superstar looks like in the current environment. And I think that's what has been the hardest thing for people to wrap their heads around is what does a superstar look like now who has come of age within the streaming era? So specifically as it pertains to Doechii, she has been around for a while.
Yeah.
She isn't a new artist. She's only a new commercially successful artist.
Right.
And the way that consumption happens, the way that the algorithms work, we're all in our little bubbles, whether
Hmm.
that's on socials or on DSPs. The algorithms dictate what we see and what is recommended to us to press play on. So as a result of this, by no fault of the artists, they didn't create these algorithms. Essentially, it looks like for the casually minded that one day you didn't exist and now you're all anyone is talking about.
Right.
And that is very hard for people to comprehend
Hmm.
because someone who feels like they are invested in new music or they are invested in hip hop to actively be discussing it ad nauseum day in, day out, be unfamiliar with an artist, and then all of a sudden it's all anyone is talking about. I get why there is a natural inclination to go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole and assume the very worst. That they're an industry plant,
Right, right, yeah.
that they're botting, that there's artificial manipulation of some sort. But I can tell you, with the limited history that I have personally with Doechii, she is one of the most hardworking, talented folks that I have had the good fortune of talking to over the past handful of years. Um, Undeniably talented, as she's shown us through live performance. And the scary part about it is she hasn't even formally released her commercial debut yet.
Right.
So I'd like to believe for her and for us, the consumers, that the best is yet to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. As somebody that's been following her for years, I think, you know, I I was like, I was like, they got something, but then I was like, am I falling trap to the TDE? Because they put out so many quality artists. Oh man, am I just projecting that like, oh, this is just going to be another very very solid artist and not like a superstar like a Schoolboy Q, who's one of my favorite artists, but obviously is not talked about in the superstar status that we mentioned. So I'm glad you brought up the algorithm thing. I think that's the biggest key there is that kind of that bubble that everybody creates. It's hard to penetrate because now everybody feels like they have their own entire world. It's completely their own ecosystem, and very rarely does something new enter that. And if it does, it feels like, well, I I know this, and this. Like I know everything. How did I not know about this? Like this doesn't seem real. This doesn't seem like something I can buy into. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to see what she does going forward. I'm really, really looking forward to Doechii. And I want to thank you again for your time, and I really, really appreciate it, Brian, aka Z. Uh, Listen, you got a lot of things you do. As you mentioned, I didn't even get all of them in the title, in the intro at the top of this show, but I greatly appreciate your time, man. I hope you could come back and please take this time to plug any and everything you want to plug regarding your world because you do a lot, and as somebody that's consumed it for years, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. A fountain of knowledge.
Thank you. For any of your viewers or listeners who are interested in learning more about the music business, they can follow me on Twitter. I am just my name, Brian Zisuk, Brian Zisook. And if you're looking for either a music streaming app or a supplemental music streaming app, perhaps you do have a subscription to a Spotify or an Apple Music, but you're looking for human curation because you're a lean forward or a lean through active streamer, give us a try. We're free. If you want to upgrade, we're half the price point of the other services at $6.99 here in the US. And I think we have, I'm biased, but I think we have the best curators in the business. These folks deeply, deeply care about the work that they do. They're all music heads. We are not some Silicon Valley based tech startup. We've been doing this for going on 13 years, and we care very deeply about the music, about the artists, about artist education. And I'll leave it with this. Chris, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Kudos to you on the branding. You not only have the light behind
Come
you,
on.
but it's also on the tee. So
This
I
this
think
this
artists
changed.
could learn a thing or two from your setup here as well.
I had to, and you're somebody that literally it's your messaging that I'm taking and trying to apply in a different way to the podcasting landscape. So I thank you a lot for your time, man, and I really, really hope to have you on again because you're an absolutely awesome source of knowledge for me. So thank you, I appreciate it.
You bet. Hit me anytime. All right.
All right, take care.